Hi everyone, my name is Alex. I work in the Public Affairs branch of the OPCW's Technical Secretariat. I'd like to thank the CWC Coalition for the opportunity to deliver a brief presentation on NGO applications and participation at CSP-28. The Public Affairs branch is part of the External Relations Division, and it manages the relationship with civil society and implements mandates provided by the OPCW's member states related to the participation of NGOs and civil society. In this presentation, I will cover 4 topics. First, the actors involved in the application process and in NGO participation at CSP. Second, we will take a look at the application process. Third, I will outline the different ways in which NGOs can participate in the conference. And finally, we will look at the expected timelines involved in the process. There are 3 main entities involved in the application and participation process of NGOs at the conferences. First, we have 193 states parties to the convention. In terms of NGO participation, the states parties are represented by the Conference of the States Parties, the principal policy-making body in which all states parties participate in, as well as the General Committee, a smaller body comprised of representatives of each regional group, which is responsible for organizing the annual session of each conference. The General Committee is responsible for approving applications for NGO attendance and participation. The Technical Secretariat compiles the details of NGOs applying to participate and attend the conference and submits the list for vetting by states parties through the General Committee. Following the decision of states parties, the General Committee will notify the Technical Secretariat of which NGOs have been recommended to participate in the conference. At this point, NGOs recommended by the GC to participate and attend the conference are not yet accredited, but are able to enter the conference preliminarily until the CSP passes a decision on attendance, which is usually on the first morning. Once a decision has been passed, the NGOs that are listed in it are accredited to attend and participate in the conference. The Technical Secretariat facilitates the application process for NGOs to attend CSPs. That means that we publish the relevant information on the OPCW's websites, social media channels, and through email communications for NGOs to learn about CSP participation and submit applications to attend. The Secretariat collects applications and presents them to the General Committee. It does not make any decisions on NGO applications itself. Upon the General Committee's decisions, the Secretariat informs NGOs on whether the applications have been approved or rejected by the General Committee. It also manages the participant registration process and facilitates NGO side events, exhibitions, and the publication of NGO statements to the conference documents page. The CWC Coalition, who are represented today by Paul and Mina, is a civil society network for NGOs. It is a separate entity from the OPCW and not involved in CSP applications or decisions. I'll let Mina speak more about the Coalition's activities. However, in terms of NGO participation at CSP, the Coalition is responsible for the organisation of the 1-hour NGO presentation agenda item, in which NGOs can address the plenary of the conference. In this next section, we will look at how the application procedure works. We will cover this in 3 parts. First, on how to submit an application. Second, on the state party review process. And third, on participant registration. First, please carefully read the CSP-28 NGO page. To get there, either follow the QR code on your screen right now, or simply find the large link on the OPCW webpage. Now, it's really important to read all the details on this page, as it has far more information than I will go into now. The application form is also accessible through that page. The next step is to submit an application. Only 1 form is required for each NGO. The first section in the form relates to the NGO's contact details. Be careful. The contact email address entered into question 10 of the form will be used as the only email which the OPCW will contact the NGO on, including communications related to decisions on its attendance and participation, as well as invitations for their participants to register if approved. No communications will be sent to individuals' email addresses. Next, the form requires details of the mission and activities of the NGO in relation to the Chemical Weapons Convention. This information is used by states parties to conduct their review of NGO applications, so it is very important to carefully consider the answers to these questions. The third section is the list of participants. NGOs may register up to 5 representatives to participate in the conference. Please consider this section in advance, as changing participants at a later date may not be possible and can also lead to delays in the application process. The final step is related to applications for financial support to participate in the conference. This may come in the form of support for travel costs or the cost of hosting an event or other activities at the conference. Only NGOs that are from countries with economies that are developing or in transition are eligible to apply. The funding comes from external sources, not from the OPCW's core budget. The level of funding has not yet been determined, but is likely to be highly limited. Applications for funding will be assessed on the quality of proposals submitted in the Statement of Request for Financial Support. Requests for support must include concrete proposals for how the NGO will use the conference as an opportunity to advocate for the convention or demonstrate recent CWC-related activities and contributions. These may include, for instance, side events or exhibitions. Once the deadline has closed in September, the details of NGOs who have submitted a complete application will be submitted to the General Committee for its consideration. After its review, the General Committee will recommend approved NGOs to the conference, while it may choose to reject others. The General Committee will inform the Technical Secretariat of which NGOs it recommends to participate in the conference and which NGOs it has rejected. It is important to note that decisions on applications are not all made at the same time. From there, approved NGOs will be informed through their contact email address listed in their application, and their participants will be invited to register on Indico. There will also be a deadline for Indico registration, which will be communicated in due course. For participants who need a visa, the information they enter on Indico will be used exactly as submitted to generate documentation to support visa applications. If any inaccurate information is entered, this will also appear on the documentation provided by the OPCW and may result in a delay to visa applications. It is the NGO's responsibility to ensure all information is accurate. The OPCW only produces documentation to support visa applications and is unable to help arrange appointments or support applications in any further regard. Now, I will quickly cover how NGOs can participate at the conference. Firstly, NGOs have a 1-hour speaking slot in the plenary. The list of speakers is coordinated by the CWC Coalition. NGOs may take seats in plenary sessions of the conference. NGOs may also host and take part in side events and exhibitions. Details of the registration procedures will be communicated to approved NGOs in due course. NGOs may also submit statements to be published on the conference document webpage. Details on how to submit statements will be provided to approved NGOs. The CWC Coalition also organizes joint statements for approved NGOs as well. And then finally, I will just touch upon kind of the expected timelines for this process. Applications opened on 6th of July. The deadline for applications is the 15th of September. No applications submitted after this deadline will be considered either. The decisions from the General Committee on the NGOs applications are expected either in late September or early October, depending on their meeting schedules and their practices. Decisions on funding we expect to take place in October. And finally, the registration deadline for participants will be in late November. So that will probably be around 1 week before the conference, but that has not been yet determined. All the information about kind of these future deadlines will be communicated to approved NGOs through their contact email address that they have listed already. And then, of course, the final dates are the conference itself, which will be held from the 27th of November to the 1st of December. So finally, that brings me to the end of my presentation. Up on the screen, you will see the main email address to get in contact with the OPCW about the NGO participation and application processes. I've also left a QR code for the CSP-28 NGO page if anybody wants to quickly get that link up on their screen. After our presentations, we will take questions submitted through the Q&A box as Mina suggested. We will not be able to answer any questions on any individual applications on the status, but on the status of any individual applications. However, if there are any queries related to those individual applications, please send them to the email address on the on screen right now. I would just like to thank everybody for listening to the presentation, and now I will hand back over to Mina. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. So Alex's presentation was really thorough, so I don't have a whole lot to add to it. I just want to go over what we, as the CWC Coalition, do in the registration process, just a little bit in more detail. But as Alex mentioned, we're involved in facilitating the registration, but also participation at the CSP itself in the form of side events and statements at the plenary session. So first, for registration, if you have any questions about the registration process, please email me at my email, mrose@armscontrol.org. Last time around, there were a few people who had maybe missed the deadline or had been accredited in the past, but then were having issues with the registration process. So if you have any issues like that, please let us know as far in advance of the deadline as you can, and we can see what we can do. Regarding the statements and side events, once the decisions about the approved NGOs come out, then I will send around a poll about what issues are the most relevant at this point that people would like to make statements about, and what the topic of side events could be also. From there, we can get the topics, and then the participants organized. So that information will be coming out after the registration period, or the applications are all done. I know that at RC5 there was some confusion about the side events in terms of what time they were taking place and which room, and there was that wasn't very clear. So and we are aware of that. So this time we'll see if we can get all of that information confirmed in advance, so that way we don't have these kind of conflicts in the future. So that's all that I have to say regarding the CSP. The CWC Coalition will be organizing a webinar in September towards the end of the month about the end of US chemical weapons demilitarization and what it represents in the whole CWC lifetime. So I will send out more information about that in the next week or so. And then we also will have opportunities for webinars in October and November. But for those, I would really like to know what people, what topics of interest there are, and if there are certain things that that somebody would like to present on. I'm going to send around a document where we can take ideas also. So yeah, to make it as interactive as possible, just let me know, and we'll stay tuned for those things. Okay. So now on to Elizabeth.
So hi, I'm Elizabeth Vecht. I'm the head of public affairs, for those who don't know me. So thank you for the opportunity. Thanks to Mina and Paul for setting up this this session. And thanks to Alex for the great overview of how to register. I think there's been some confusion in the past on how the whole process works. So I hope it's a little bit clearer now on who, which decisions are taken by whom and in which format. Those of you who were at RC5 or who followed the discussions online will know that there's great interest among states parties, member states, in civil society engagement. There's been quite a lot of debate on the topic. The debate continued into the last Executive Council meeting, and we're expecting some kind of more formal process to kick off probably before the next CSP. So I just think it's good for you as the NGO community to be aware of the fact that member states are keen to engage with civil society. So this is an opportunity to kind of think about what that means. How can NGOs, add value to the debates that are going on? What type of concrete asks might be coming from the civil society community? So lots of different opportunities to think concretely about what the role of your particular NGO could be, or civil society in general. I think this is actually good news. One of the things that I find quite encouraging is that the focus is on the one hand thinking about the whole process and the administrative things. I know that people have been quite critical in the past of how the whole accreditation process works. That's one aspect which I know will continue to engage member states. It's not something that we in the technical secretariat have any kind of influence on. It's not in our mandate, but it really is up to the member states to make decisions on those things. But I think what's important to note is that the discussions go beyond just the accreditation. It's not just about who can be at CSP or not. It's really finding mechanisms and ways for a more sustained, more regular way of engaging with civil society. And I think that's again something where you as the civil society community may want to think about other formats, other ways of interacting with member states. Are there webinars or online events or conferences or regional workshops that you may want to start thinking about in collaboration with certain regional groups or member states or even the technical secretariat? So if there are groups out there that have concrete ideas or suggestions, let us know. We can, we're happy to collate any information or any suggestions that are out there and help put you in touch with each other. And I think the same goes for also questions of funding. Alex had mentioned that we do have a little bit of funding that we're hoping will be available. We haven't seen it yet, to support participation for civil society representatives from developing countries and economies in transition. But that shouldn't stop you from doing your own fundraising. I think that's another really important point to make, that because we don't have a regular budget for this, I think all of us rely on going out and doing a little bit of fundraising. And in that context, I would also encourage you to find ways of pooling resources. So there was a concern, and Mina had just mentioned it, over scheduling of side events, for example. Well, one way to make sure that everybody can participate in all of the side events that they find, important or relevant, is to coordinate this in advance and maybe pool resources. Maybe you can get together with 2 or 3 other groups and organize a joint event rather than trying to do 3 separate events. Just something for you to consider. The final point I wanted to make is just one on greater outreach and diversity. the civil society group that we have been working with over the past, well, I've been here for a year and a half, are fantastic people, and I'm really looking forward to seeing as many as possible of you here in The Hague again in November. I think we all could do with thinking a little bit about the diversity of that group. There's quite a lot of diversity of opinions. There's a lot of diversity in terms of different topics that are covered. I think we would like to see a little bit more diversity when it comes to regional representation. And we also, I think all of us could benefit from having a greater presence of younger participants. I think that's one of the topics that we've also been encouraged to look at from the member states, is to find ways to engage kind of the next generation in these discussions, because that really is what will make the conversations and the topics more impactful and more sustainable in the longer term. So just a couple of buzzwords there from my side, a little bit of food for thought. And yeah, I look forward to, I wanted to echo what Paul had said. I really would encourage everybody to register, because once you've registered, that means you're in the system. That means you receive our email updates, you receive information from the CWC Coalition, and it gives us an opportunity to also look at other ways of engaging, even if you're not able to physically come to The Hague in November. I think that's all I wanted to say. So thank you again for the opportunity, and looking forward to hearing from you.
And we just have a few minutes to answer a few questions that we got. So the first one we have, how are new NGOs accredited? And I think that Alex can take this.
Of course, thank you very much. So the links that I shared earlier, so that would be opcw.org/calendar/CSP/NGO is exactly where you need to submit a registration. That can be easily found on the OPCW homepage. There's a big link which says NGO applications open now. When you click there, you get to a landing page which has all of the information that you need to apply, all the, sort of the guidelines and kind of like what you need to put in, all the timelines. A lot of the information that I presented already is on that webpage, and there is the link to the application form. And then once an application is submitted before the 15th of September, then it'll go through the process that I outlined, where it goes through the state party review, and then approved NGOs will then be able to register their participants as well.
Great, thank you. And the second question we have, what is the deadline for sending visa support? It says the visa application takes 2 weeks, or could be longer, and then maybe an additional week or so to obtain documents. So yeah, so more of a timeline on that.
Yeah, I can say that one again. So after an NGO has been approved and has been informed that they can register their participants on Indico, each participant will need to register on Indico. Once that registration has been approved by the Secretariat, we assume it will take around a week if all the information is entered accurately. Then the supporting documentation for visa applications will be produced. Of course, the OPCW itself does not help with applications themselves. All we do is produce documents to support participants in their applications as well. So one thing that's really important here is that we've had a number of instances where people put in their own wrong dates of birth, or they've spelled their names incorrectly. And the thing is that the information entered into Indico is what is used to produce this documentation. So anything that is entered inaccurately will lead to major delays, not only for that individual's process itself, but it also leads to delays for the entire community, because we're not massively resourced. You know, we put many people on it as we can, but it does take time to, of course, review all these documents and review all this information. So the quicker that you submit accurate information, the quicker that you will get documentation to support your visa is the ultimate question. There is no deadline, but as soon as you're invited to go to register on Indico, that's when you should do it, and then you'll get it as soon as possible from that date.
Okay, so That's all that we have in terms of general questions. There are some specific ones that have been asked, which I will share with, well, we can get around to those more privately later. But for now, that's all that we have that applies to everyone. So we, I think, are ready to end. If Paul or Elizabeth want to say some final words.
Mina, I think there was one question from Sharier Kateri, who said that I applied, maybe I think it's the Tehran Peace Museum has applied and included only one name and would like to apply and add 2 more names. And should he just modify his application, or should he submit a second application then, do you think?
So yeah, unfortunately, existing applications cannot be modified. So Sharia, I would request that you just submit the same application again, but just add in all of the names of the list in the list of participants. If you need a copy of your existing application, just get in contact with us, and we can just send it to you to make that as easy as possible.
And I think too, a question we always get is some people don't necessarily have an NGO. And we know some of those. Some of them are well known to all of us in the OPCW. If they want to apply, Paul Smith without an NGO, can he or she apply privately, or should he somehow try to align himself with an NGO?
So I can take that one. The issue is that the GC, the General Committee, accredits not individuals, but the NGO. So there's no mechanism for accrediting an individual. So the best way would be to find an official body that you can be part of. I think last for the review conference, we had a few participants who registered as members of the CWC coalition, and that was fine. But if there are any, particular instances, or people have a concern, or they feel that they're not being accurately represented, just email us, get in touch with us, and I'm sure we'll find a solution. I agree with you, Paul. I think it's good to have a really nice kind of critical mass of NGOs that are accredited. It also shows the importance of the interaction, and we wouldn't want to exclude anybody for as long as they're approved by the General Committee. I'm sure we can work it out. So, but do just get in touch with us if there are any concerns like that.
Yeah, that's good. And I would emphasize too, and ask all the people who participated actively for the last 10 years, think of other NGOs as well. We're always, as you mentioned, Elizabeth and Alex, we're always trying to reach out further. And as the political scientists say, it's a snowball technique. You cast 3 stones and it ripples and it turns into 25 ripples. We're constantly trying to get more people. We don't have every country represented. We don't have, to some extent, much of certain continents represented. So please, cast widely and encourage people to attend. There was also, I wanted to say, there was also a series of questions from a fellow we all know well who's been excluded multiple times by a certain state party or certain states parties, and relates to the General Committee process. And the only thing I can say is we've worked this. I've worked it till I'm blue in the face, really. And the states parties make a very strong statement. At CSP-5, we had 52 signatures, I think, on a first day statement encouraging civil society inclusiveness. And we had one at CSP-27, but that's an ongoing issue, relates to local politics and regional politics. And we're all well aware of it, and we're still working it. I would encourage, though, that the General Committee timeline to make sure, regardless of what they do with an NGO, make sure that they give us plenty of time for visas. Because years in the past, the stragglers, and some of these have been rejected, some of them have been accepted, have come in 2 weeks, sometimes less, before the conference. And in my mind, there's a certain reason for that. So we need at least 4 weeks before the conference to get visas, I think. So I would urge us all to do our best to try to get responses one way or the other, at least within a month before. That means, what's that? That's late October. That should be doable.
Yeah, I think we're from our side, we're doing what we can to get member states to at least consider the applications as soon as possible. We don't have any influence on their calendar. Obviously, it also depends on their on member states and delegations availability. Just in general about the whole process, there's been a lot of debate among member states on whether the current practice of recommendation and accreditation should be reviewed, I believe was the word that was used. And I think that will continue among member states. Again, this is something that is out of our hands at the Technical Secretariat. It's out of the hands of the coalition. It's just something that we can, remain aware of. And I think everybody is very acutely aware of the situation is not ideal for certain NGOs that have been rejected in the past. But in that context, I just wanted to remind or just reiterate what I was saying earlier. NGO or civil society engagement with the OPCW, so both the Secretariat and member states, does not just happen in that 1 week in November, right? It's something we can do year round. There's nothing stopping us from having these online events, from having other events. If you're organizing an event, if you're hosting an event, if you have an idea, let us know. And it's about a more sustained, regular engagement, dialogue. I think there's a lot of value that the civil society community can add to deliberations at CSP. If you wait until CSP to make that contribution, it's probably already too late. So you want to find mechanisms to get your views heard in advance of the conference. Of course, it's important to be in the room, and the status of being accredited at a conference, I understand that. I don't want to minimize that, but there's more than just participating in CSP. So maybe that's something also to consider. And I think the discussions will continue, certainly at the next Executive Council meeting and into CSP.
There's a couple more questions that I'll take as well. Don't mind me just going on. So there's two from Thomas Kwame Osei. So the first one is related to visas. So I'll just reiterate the point I made earlier. So once your NGO has been approved by the General Committee, you will have been informed by the Secretariat to register your participants on Indico. Once that participant registration has been submitted on Indico, if it is accurate and complete, and we suggest it will take no more than 1 working week to produce the supporting documentation for visa applications. Of course, gaining the application, gaining the appointment, and all those things, that is down to the NGO representatives themselves. We have no influence over the authorities of the Schengen countries who issue the visas. We have no influence of speeding that up. And of course, we also have no influence over the states parties on their decision-making processes. So we suspect that if the decisions will begin to be communicated around the end of September and early October, hopefully the last ones by early October. Again, we cannot guarantee any of this. But if at that point that you received an invitation to register on Indico, you submit it right away within 1 working week. As long as the information is correct, you will get that information. So perhaps it's possible to forecast from that when you can book your appointment for a visa or something along those lines as well. And then there's a second point from Thomas as well, which I'll also cover, which is it possible that NGOs get to know all the other registered NGOs? I assume this means sort of in lead up to the conference. So As I mentioned earlier, the accreditation for the conference does not actually happen to the first day of the conference. The approvals from the NGO, from the General Committee, is actually a preliminary recommendation to the conference. It's not until the conference itself passes the decision on those NGOs that they are listed. So we cannot share that information until it's been passed by states parties. However, what we will do is we will point people to get involved with the coalition, and the coalition can play this role in communicating. Of course, it is then important that NGOs themselves coordinate amongst themselves, get involved with each other and communicate in order to see who's going in advance and how you can coordinate activities beforehand. Thank you.
Okay. It looks like that's all the questions that we have. So if there is anything that that Paul or Elizabeth would like to say to end, we can do that.
No, I just thank everybody for the nice presentations, and Alex and Elizabeth and Mina in particular, and keep working. We're all for strengthening the CWC and the OPCW, and it's been going well so far. We made great strides, and we have a new stage in a non-declared stockpile destruction stage, I guess. Most destruction is finished, but not all, depending on what pops up in the future, right? So I thank everyone for participating, and we'll hold another webinar in late September sometime.
Thanks for organizing, and see you all soon.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.